a world where the greatest secrets are not found in history books, but hidden beneath the ice of Antarctica. Admiral Richard E. Byrd, with his remarkable achievements and solid reputation, dared to make a shocking claim that this icy land is actually home to human life and activity. Byrd did not merely see an empty and cold land, but discovered traces of an ancient civilization existing beneath the eternal ice. When someone has been awarded the Medal of Honor, the Navy Cross, the Navy Distinguished Service Medal twice, the Distinguished Service Medal twice, and the Congressional Gold Medal, their claims carry weight. Admiral Richard E. Byrd, one of the most renowned officers in the history of the United States Navy, once asserted that Antarctica is not the desolate, icy wasteland we have long believed it to be. He hypothesized that it is a vibrant continent where humans have lived for generations. If this is true, then everything the government has told us up to now has been lies. This is not just a simple deception, but a colossal secret carefully concealed. His hypothesis presents an entirely new picture of Antarctica, a place not merely of ice and snow, but one that holds secrets of human life. If Byrd is correct, this would completely overthrow what we have known about our planet and create a revolution in history and science. The government may have tried to cover up this truth, but human curiosity and the desire to explore never cease. Byrd's story is a reminder that there are always mysteries and unexplored realms in this world, and individuals like him will continue to inspire us to seek the truth, no matter how carefully it is hidden. The like button and channel subscription are always a great source of motivation that you give us to be able to make videos every day. Thank you very much, and let's learn about today's interesting story. Throughout the summer, trips were made to take pictures and study the rocks, and radio contact with the outside world was kept at all times. Then, during the summer of 1933 and 1934, Byrd went on his second trip and worked alone for 5 months at what was known as an advanced base, which was a meteorological station. It was during this expedition that he almost died from carbon monoxide poisoning from a stove that didn't have enough airflow. While all these were great and useful expeditions, those were not the expeditions that people talked about. The first two were free of any sort of controversies, but the third one wasn't. And weirdly enough, this was when the government started getting involved with Byrd's expedition. From 1946 to 1947, Byrd led an expedition called Operation High Jump, which set up a research base on the Ross Ice Shelf called Little America for 4, Antarctica, a composite portrait of a continent which has challenged man since first he could sail beyond the limits of his horizons. World War II had shown that U.S. ships and aircraft were not up to cold weather. Ships that were operating in the Arctic Sea often froze up, and I mean that literally. Planes coming from Greenland and even Iceland crashed just because of the weather. So in response to that, the U.S. came up with a set of steps to make it easier to use these ships and planes under Arctic conditions. At the same time, the U.S. wanted to see if this could be done from a long distance. Operation High Jump would be created to test and find answers to these questions. A naval task force would go to Antarctica as part of a drill to see how well the equipment stood out against the cold. Then, also, map out a big part of it to either claim the land or to satisfy Pentagon's curiosity. And the best person for this kind of job was the fearless and experienced Admiral Byrd. The operation went so well that it got terminated early. It was because of this mission that ships and planes would be winterized in the years after High Jump so that they could go to war with the Soviets again if one broke out. The most well-known example is how nuclear-capable B-29 bombers were made ready for winter so they could fly from Alaska. All what I've told you so far was the government version of the story. But here is where people started to ask questions. If it was just a drill, why are you going with 14 ships, 33 aircraft, and about 4,700 men armed to the teeth. There were 2 destroyers tankers, 2 heavily armed seaplanes, and an attack submarine, all fully stocked with the best weapons in the entire Navy. That was really a lot of equipment and personnel for just a drill. Apparently, they needed that number to fight the Nazis in Antarctica. You see, in December 1938, Hitler already knew he was about to start a war, so he was putting things in order and getting help from every aspect, including the ones that people would call you crazy for thinking about it. Imagine being on the brink of war and then sending your troops to go find mysterious ancient artifacts that could be used in your favor. Sounds stupid, right? But to Hitler it wasn't. Anything that could help him was explored, so he signed off on multiple expeditions. One of these expeditions launched on December 17, 1938, and the SAS Schwabenland was sent on a secret mission to Antarctica. On board were scientists, engineers, and also members of the Thule Society, which was a German occultist group. The Thule Society had a lot of beliefs, and most of those beliefs were strongly rooted in racism, hurting anyone who was different than them, especially the Jews. But one belief they had was that a highly advanced race of human-like beings called Aryans existed somewhere deep inside the Earth, and the entrance to Aryan's world was at the South Pole. So the classified mission given by Hitler to the SS Schwabenland was to find a location for a secret underground base and make contact with the Aryans living in the Hollow Earth. Once contact was made, they were to negotiate for access to their technology so that they could use it in the upcoming war. The ship reached the Antarctic coast a month later, and for the next couple of weeks, they mapped hundreds of thousands of square miles of the continent. About 150 miles inland, aerial reconnaissance found what is described as an Arctic oasis, an area of about 300 square miles. This area was free of ice, filled with warm water, and even contained plant life, which shouldn't be. The ocean beneath the oasis was a geothermal vent that kept the area relatively warm. This was the ideal place for a base, especially for U-boats. This is where the Nazis would establish the infamous underground facility known as Base 211. Over the course of World War II, Base 211 became a massive complex as large as a small city. Noticing what was happening, the American government was getting worried about this development happening in Antarctica. What's that saying again? Keep your friends close, your enemies closer. And America was going to do that with Operation High Jump. Now, Operation High Jump was supposed to last 6 to 8 months. But remember, I said the mission was cut short because it was successful. The mission lasted just 40 days, and almost immediately, everyone was evacuated and the operation terminated. The Navy said it was because winter was coming early and the weather was getting worse. But in Antarctica, February was the height of summer. Their statement didn't correlate with the facts. Remember that they went there in the first place to test their stuff against the cold. If what they said was true, shouldn't the weather be perfect for their test? This was when the conspiracy theories started coming out. Did something happen in Antarctica that made the massive Navy group return to the United States? Probably to reassess and regroup. And what were they regrouping for? For a long time, nobody knew. But all that changed when a diary was found. On one of his routine flights, Admiral Byrd was flying over the South Pole while speaking with the American public over live radio, being relayed by the Navy to listeners. This was like watching your favorite influencer talk or share their experiences. However, during the broadcast, Byrd was cut off from his radio monologue for nearly 3 hours. No one could hear him, not even the Navy. This was a problem. No one knew where Byrd was or could communicate with him. It was after Byrd released his diary that we were able to see what happened in those 3 missing hours. We are crossing over the small mountain range and still proceeding northward as best as can be ascertained. Beyond the mountain range is what appears to be a valley with a small river or stream running through the center portion. There should be no green valley below, Something is definitely wrong and abnormal here. We should be over ice and snow. To the port side are great forests growing on the mountain slopes. Our navigation instruments are still spinning. The gyroscope is oscillating back and forth. Byrd had stumbled on a place he couldn't explain. Antarctica is one of the coldest places on Earth. Warmth and green, fleshy plantations shouldn't exist. To even sound more confusing, Byrd talks about not seeing the sun anymore, which was worrying for him because he was having problems with his navigation system, so he had to resort to using the sun for directions, and now he can't find the sun. The light here seems different. I cannot see the sun anymore. We make another left turn, and we spot what seems to be a large animal of some kind below us. It appears to be an elephant. No, it looks more like a mammoth. This is incredible. Yet there it is. Decrease altitude to 1,000 feet and take binoculars to better examine the animal. It is confirmed. It is definitely a mammoth-like animal. Report this to base camp. He tried to radio in, but the radio was not working, and that's when he saw it. Ahead, we spot what seems to be a city. This is impossible. The aircraft seems light and oddly buoyant. The controls refuse to respond. My God. Off our port and starboard wings are a strange type of aircraft. They are closing rapidly alongside. They are disc-shaped and have a radiant quality to them. They are close enough now to see the markings on them. It is a type of swastika. This is fantastic. Now, even I don't know what he saw. Was it an alien? Was it an ancient civilization? Was it actually the Aryans the Germans were looking for? What was it? Byrd's radio finally starts to work, and a voice comes through speaking English with a Nordic or Germanic accent. The voice tells Byrd that they would help him land, and he shouldn't worry that he's in good hands. This was during World War II, so hearing anyone talk with a German accent about you trusting them was like trusting the devil for a blessing. But Byrd couldn't do anything or run away. The engines on his plane stopped working and were under some strange control. It was driving itself and even landed safely all by itself. Several men are approaching on foot toward our aircraft. They are tall with blonde hair. In the distance is a large, shimmering city, pulsating with rainbow hues of color. I do not know what is going to happen now, but I see no signs of weapons on those approaching. I hear now a voice ordering me by name to open the cargo door. I comply. Endlog Byrd was taken from the aircraft and boarded on a small platform-like conveyance with no wheels and into the city. Byrd was in awe of what he saw. A city made of crystal materials that made it very beautiful. He was then taken into a large building, and it was there he met the one known as the Master. I see a man with delicate features and with the etching of years upon his face. He is seated at a long table. He motions me to sit down in one of the chairs. After I am seated, he places his fingertips together and smiles. He speaks softly again and conveys the following. We have let you enter here because you are of noble character and well known on the surface world, Admiral. Surface world? I half gasp under my breath. Yes, the Master replies with a smile. You are in the domain of the Aryan, the inner world of the Earth. Byrd was shocked. If what the Master just said is true, that means everything we've ever known about our universe and Earth is wrong. Let me take a moment to explain why this is mind-blowing. There is a theory known as the hollow Earth theory. Some people heavily believe that there was, and probably is, an opening to the center of the Earth. In the 1690s, English astronomer Edmund Halley told the Royal Society of London that he thought the Earth was made up of stacked, spherical shells that spun in different directions around a central core. Halley thought that the space between the shells could have conditions that supported life. In the 1810s, American officer John Cleves Sims added to Halley's idea by saying that those spheres could be reached through holes in both the North and South Poles. Some believers say that this place is home to aliens, Vikings, ancient cultures, and even Nazis that were trying to escape the Allies. They also claim that Adam and Eve from the Bible were banished from the inside of the earth to the outside, and the lost tribes of Israel migrated from the outside to the inside. And of course, you don't know of this because it has been debunked by numerous governments. But if what Byrd said and stumbled upon is true, then that means we've all lived a lie. The master told Byrd that he meant him no harm, but he wanted to talk to him because Byrd was a respectable person whose opinion matters in the surface world, which was true. The master then tells Byrd the reason for intercepting Byrd's plane was to give him a message to tell the surface world about the war going on. The atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, were a cause for worry for them. The world had not seen something like that before. It was alarming for them that they had to risk exposure and send their flying ships to investigate what had happened. Surprisingly, this tallies the numerous accounts of eyewitnesses of UFOs that were recorded during that period. And weirdly enough, they are mostly seen in nuclear plants that could be used for nuclear warfare, in which later the plants will usually report that something just stopped working or the plant was sabotaged, like in the case of the Solway Firth spaceman. This is a weird thing to think or say, but it's weird that we've not had a World War III. Not that I am praying for one. I love peace. But knowing how humanity likes division more than unity, it's just weird. So, maybe we owe these people our lives. The master keeps talking about how they have to intervene because mankind has learned to tamper with certain powers. Our emissaries have already delivered messages to the powers of your world, and yet they do not heed. Your race has now reached the point of no return, for there are those among you who would destroy your very world rather than relinquish their power as they know it. The dark ages that will come now for your race will cover the earth like a pall, but I believe that some of your race will live through the storm. Beyond that, I cannot say. We see at a great distance a new world stirring from the ruins of your race, seeking its lost and legendary treasures, and they will be here, my son, safe in our keeping. When that time arrives, we shall come forward again to help revive your culture and your race. Perhaps by then, you will have learned the futility of war and its strife. And after that time, certain of your culture and science will be returned for your race to begin anew. You, my son, are to return to the surface world with this message. After Byrd was given the full message, he was escorted out of the room and soon arrived back at their aircraft and were escorted out of the Crystal City. As soon as they left the city, a radio message came through. "We are leaving you now, Admiral. Your controls are free. Off Vitertion." And that was it. Byrd was confused about what just happened. Finally, his radio was working, and the Navy could reach him. On March 11, 1947, after the expedition was cut short, Byrd attended a staff meeting at the Pentagon where he was debriefed, and he let everyone present know what he saw and the message he got. After this debriefing, Admiral Byrd was detained for several hours. 6 hours, 39 minutes to be exact. He was interviewed intently by top security forces and a medical team. He was placed under strict control and was ordered to remain silent about everything he saw or heard at the Crystal City. He was reminded that after all, he was a military man and must obey orders. Their plan worked because Byrd hardly gave an interview after Operation High Jump. He was always watchful of what he was saying, but Byrd writing it down in his diary and it being released after his death was him having the last laugh. When Byrd left the expedition and returned back to Chile, because that was where the Navy retreated to first, before moving back home, he was interviewed by a Chilean journalist, and in that interview, he talked about how the U.S. will be faced by an enemy that can fly pole to pole. It sounded weird, and people were wondering what he meant. But after his diary was released to the public, people couldn't help but wonder if he meant the civilization he met at the South Pole. It didn't also help matters that the Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal, committed quote-unquote suicide. According to official reports, Forrestal allegedly jumped out of the window of the psychiatric ward in Maryland, and that was shortly after Operation High Jump. Before his death, he was an advocate that aliens existed, and he wanted to inform the U.S. public about this issue, only to be tagged mad, admitted into a mental hospital, and later allegedly jumped to his death. The one man who knew something about Operation High Jump and was going to talk about it was now dead. Case closed. As usual, there are critics who make solid points about people making up stories. I sometimes find myself as a critic when reviewing stories like this. Like, for example, stories of equipment malfunctioning were believed to be works of aliens, but it turns out that the extreme cold caused a lot of systems to malfunction. This is why Operation High Jump was initiated in the first place. When Byrd spoke about the United States being attacked from pole to pole in his interview, he was referring to attacks from Germans coming from the South Pole to the North Pole, not necessarily aliens. Journalists have a knack for making simple stories sound extravagant to capture people's attention and sell more newspapers. However, the most significant criticism is that the diary never existed. Yes, it was never written by Byrd. It was all a fabrication, just like how it was debunked that Byrd was the first man to ever reach the North Pole, a title he held for a long time, even after his death, until someone finally questioned its plausibility and found that he wasn't the first to reach the North Pole. One troubling aspect is how almost every country in the world, which often fights over minor issues, comes together and coexists peacefully when it comes to Antarctica. This is encapsulated in the Antarctica Treaty, signed in the 1960s, which sets the rules for the continent. If you don't know, Antarctica is shrouded in strange political secrecy. You cannot visit Antarctica unless you are a scientist or given special permission. The continent is virtually off limits. Yes, a few companies offer expensive cruises, but these businesses must be connected to intelligence agencies, meaning whatever they show you is already filtered information. It's peculiar to me that the Antarctica Treaty has been so effective. The treaty ostensibly protects resources and the environment, which is fine, but it's strange that a person from anywhere in the world cannot freely visit Antarctica. Also, we should remember that over the past few decades, there have been numerous reports, even witnesses, of UFOs flying out of the ocean in that region. Even if Byrd's diary is deemed fake, it still prompts us to question things. The undeniable fact in all these stories, fake or real, is that Byrd was missing for 3 hours. Where was he during those 3 hours when he was unreachable? How was he able to stay in flight for over 3 hours without refueling? The mysterious deaths of the Secretary of Defense and Byrd's own son turn what should be a closed case into an open one. Byrd's son was found in an abandoned warehouse in Baltimore just days before the supposed fake diary was released. The official report listed his cause of death as malnutrition and dehydration. How does the son of a prominent Massachusetts family end up dying of malnutrition? If all these mentioned events are mere coincidences, that's a lot of coincidences, don't you think?